Ahoy, swabs! Captain Jeff the pirate here at shared service. And welcome to another reviewing and questioning of adventure time. Today's episode, Walnuts and Rain. The episode opens outside at night. Finn and Jake have just been talking about their latest mathematical adventure. That'd be algebraic. When suddenly, Finn falls down a hole, losing his siren and his flashlight. Jake, be wondering what happened, hits his head on a tree and falls down a separate hole. And thus the adventure begins. Finn awakens and he be in what appears to be a very giant kitchen. He be sitting on a very giant chair, and there be these creatures. They are made of food, like they have a watermelon for a body, and they have like a steak for a head. And all these creatures be preparing all this food. And it'd be a huge kitchen and pantry, and all this stuff be giant. Especially the gentleman sitting next to Finn, who is literally a giant. He be huge. He has this tiny, tiny crown on his head. So he'd be wondering what's to be going on. So he says hello, and he says, "Hello there, young man, and welcome to the kingdom of huge." And he says that he fell down through that tiny crack in the ceiling and landed in a normal-sized pie. Of course, I guess when you're a giant, everything else is giant, but to him everything is proportionately the correct size. So Finn says he has to go and find Jake. But the king says, "Wait an hour. You'll be able to see my cuckoo clock chime. And besides, if you leave now, your friend may show up, and you'll two have missed each other." Being reasonable logic, Finn decides to wait for Jake. Meanwhile, Jake wakes up, and he be in a completely different situation. He be on this weird floating raft-like thing. It's being suspended by these 4 parachutes. And there be a bear. And the bear just, he'd be asking, "How you doing?" And Jake be like, "Where am I?" And Bill says, and the bear says, "You be on my raft." Now, the bear is named Bill because Jake asks what's his name. And he said he'd fallen down for so long ago he can't remember. So to make sure he could, he wrote it down. He is 7718. It's basically, he just read his own name backwards, upside down. Arr. So they be suspended in this parachute and be falling down. So Bill, or Seven, as he likes to be called, he says to wait for a little bit to see if Finn will show up. So Jake sees the logic in that, and thus the waiting game begins. Roughly. So we cut back to Finn, who still be in the kingdom of huge. So the clock goes off, ding dong, ding dong. It'd be pretty interesting, but this be what the king does all day. He sits in his giant chair, is constantly eating, and waits for his clock to chime. That's all his entertainment is. His saying be good things come to those two who wait, so the hour has passed, and Finn decides to try to go, but the king is enraged and say, "Nay, you will sit there, you will eat, and you will wait, and you will watch and enjoy the clock with me." So Finn is now tied up with a regular-sized spaghetti, and thus he begins to plan his escape. Meanwhile, Jake has learned about Bill's origin. He was trying to go to the Candy Kingdom to sell candles and playing cards. Something spooked his mule and caused his cart to crash off the road into this giant hole. And Bill quickly arranged it so the tarp of his wagon could serve as a parachute to keep him aloft and floating down the hole. So he's been playing free cell all this time. He drinks the water from the rain as it falls, and the occasional walnuts as they fall, so there we get the title of Walnuts and Rain. So we cut back to Finn, and he comes up with a plan to escape. And so he invokes it. So he has one of the food boys bring over some food to him while the king is watching the striking of the hour on the clock. He gives them some food and they untie him. He proceeds to escape and run. The food boys, the king orders him to be stopped, but he fights out of their way or escapes them. And then meanwhile, the king actually has to get up out of his own chair and try to chase him. So he chases him over to the clock, to which Finn decides to stop once and for all. He gets behind it and pushes it off the top of the stove. So there's the range, you have the stove, the range, and then there's the thing for the vent that takes up all the heat, and that's where the clock is. He pushes it off the vent, it crashes down, hits some water, and stops the stove from boiling. Turns off all the heat. So then, turns out the other hole that Jake was in was the shaft for the heat escaping, which is why the raft was afloat for all that time. It comes down into the kitchen and lands on the water with Jake and Bill. Finn is happy and is like, Jake, you gotta help me. This guy tried to kidnap me. So Jake gets, what? And so then he gets his fist to grow really huge. Huge enough to actually deck the king of the kingdom of huge. With the king knocked out and the clock destroyed, our heroes take Bill and proceed to escape. So, that pretty much wraps it up. They'd be taking Bill back to the Candy Kingdom so he can try to live a normal life. So, yeah, I thought this was a fairly good episode. It had a pretty good story, and it was really great how both Finn and Jake, they were really next to each other, but you didn't really know that. It was like they were worlds apart, but I also liked how the king, while he wouldn't be, I wouldn't describe him as a villain. He seems to be so self-absorbed with his own clock and with all the food. So I'd say he's kind of greedy. But I liked how the episode worked out. It was very well played, very, very well written, and it was very entertaining. I enjoyed it. So I give Walnuts Rain, which I think is a really weird title given the subject matter. I give this episode a 1.5 thumbs up. Alright, well that's all the time we have for this episode. So until next time, this be Captain Jeff for Review and Question Adventure Time. I would be reviewing and questioning it. Saying thank you for watching, and as always, arrgh. Have a nice day.